Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome again. It's for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core to Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. And so I've got, how many titles do I have today? 4 titles. And to try to continue with my pattern of going through them and then returning to them. Number 1 is my gift to you. Number 2 is the roll-up ankle endpoint. Number 3 is it is the order you do things in that matters. Number 4 is it's not dance, it's Pilates. So it unnerves me. It seems like I'd rather just start with number 1 and work my way from there. But number 1, my gift to you. So 3 parts to that. What's my gift to you? My gift to you has been, and I think always will be, 2 things. What are those 2 things? CT and MMP. Why bring them up in that order? Because if you're going to go from conventional and contemporary to someplace new, it's best to make the bulk of that leap to someplace new in acknowledging that the body employs oppositional rotation between axes, named core new tension by yours truly, but employs that, uses that to engage itself to move through space. That it even happens. So that's by far the bigger picture, and well, it depends on your point of view. But see, you can be aware of and use core new tension in your own movement and in your instruction and teaching and whatever you're teaching or moving, without a consideration at all to Pilates. Because Pilates is the mother of 10,000 points of view. So far out of which there is only tradition, governed by an entrenched aristocracy that trades in prestige with money as a sidecar. But it's nice to recognize the relationship. So my gift to you is CT, awareness of a biomechanical means that the body uses to move through space. And the greatest part about it is what? It's sensational. It's beyond just being in the realm of intellectual, as though that's high ground, because it involves what's beyond the intellectual, which is the rest of the being and the observing capacities within the MMP point of view. Okay, so my gift to you is MMP because that's a point of view that goes beyond traditional, conventional, contemporary, and looks at Pilates as an ideal based right on what he says in his book. That may be too thin of a chain of evidence for you, but it's at least coming from a place, his book, that is published all over the world. and I think a few languages by now, right? MMP chooses its perspective, its point of view, by theorizing an ideal within the original work based on the evidence in Joe's book, which is what? His definition, his promise, and his sequence. Hopefully, if you've had enough of me by now, you have a handle on the understanding of my profession is that I identified two things, coordinated tension and the ideal within Joe's work, Joe's original work, right out of his book. And if those don't matter to you, that's fine, but that's my point of view. And in the identification of those two things, the biomechanics of coordinated tension is applicable to humanity, and the point of view of Pilates as an ideal, which is one point of view out of as many people as there are, because there is no definitive authority within tradition. And tradition may like it like that and want to continue that way, but some portion of the tsunami of Pilates passion, the tsunami of people passionate about Pilates, will seek higher ground where it makes not only sense in their head, but sense that they can feel. And so, it's an actual number. It's not an actual title, is it? I'm still on my gift to you. And so my title is, Are You a Leader? Are you a leader? And I put down student, thinking of this all about being a teacher, an instructor, a Pilates instructor. But the question about are you a leader, and to what extent you're leading as an instructor, your student, and before you got to that, were you a leader as a student of yourself? And does that grow into be having a tribe, having a studio, a school, a business, a union, an insurance company, all of those levels of grouping? So are you a leader? See, if you know about CT and MMP, most people, I think, are aware of it, and they think, oh, that's nice. And I don't know that the wave will be big enough or affect them in a way that would cause them to want to or need to look beyond their preferred scope of perception, the way they want to look at it. So, if you are a leader, I'm just so jazzed because I've spent a long time, not so much recently, but longer ago, putting in place ways for you to share CT and MMP. And I had a viewer go to Zazzle.com and search Michael Miller Pilates. At least that's how I think they got there, because I didn't tell them to go. And bought 2 t-shirts. Imagine that. Imagine that. Like 2 lone rocks coming down a steep grade of rocks. My message about my gift to you is CT and MMP, and then asking if part of your self-image is seeing yourself as a leader, then I encourage you to recognize CT and MMP and explore what's available to you at Zazzle.com in the way of t-shirts and cards and mugs, right? T-shirts, show you know, right? And order large. They run small, as I've at least heard. Order large, larger than normal, because they run small. Okay, so, all right, so, here's, all right, number 2, the roll-up ankle endpoint. Let's go backwards from the roll-up ankle endpoint. What are endpoints? Now, if you've been watching, you know that each one of these axes of rotation are an endpoint, or define an endpoint. So the end of the axis at each of these places, if you were looking right down the line, you'd be looking at the endpoint. Okay? So the axis, the endpoint at the ankle is this one. So now we know about endpoints, we know about which endpoint we're talking about, and now we're talking about the roll-up on the mat. I rely on your imagination to follow along or get into the position. So let's say that Cordu on my image lays down so that this is the ankle out at the end of the leg. That would be a pointed foot, and this would be a pressing through the heel. Okay? If you're going to be a Pilates instructor, you have to defend yourself with at least some terminology in multiple disciplines and in the field of the body. If you point your foot out this way, it's plantar flexion. And I remember that as planting your foot. So it's your foot going this way, going this way. And yet when you go the opposite of that, when you rotate the opposite way at the ankle, okay, that's dorsiflexion. Okay? And sorry if I'm boring with terms you already know. But just like I refer to metatarsals, because in French saying the ball of the foot takes a paragraph, and the word metatarsals means the same in any language around the world. So in that regard, as an instructor, I encourage you to be capable of making connections of meanings through terminology and gestures that you use. Gestures meaning sign language. So the roll-up at the end point, this all comes from someone demonstrating on social media the roll-up, and supine, arms back. You see a flexion of the ankle and a dorsiflexion, okay? And that flexion sort of wavers during the roll-up, and then it goes to a pointed foot, long leg, on the roll back down. Okay? And so, in expression, maybe technically, what you see is a good approximation of what you're attempting to do classically, insofar as classically you flex at the heel and dorsiflexion to come up, and you point on the way back down. In the rollover on the mat, classically, see, the first achievement is just being able to bring your legs over your head without necessarily engaging an endpoint at your ankles or your metatarsals. But of course, ideally, or as soon as possible, you go from that to the nearest endpoint from where you're reaching out to, which is more the ankle than the metatarsals, right? So it's out away from center. So in the rollover, the first direction is pushing out through the heels to bring your legs over your head, legs together, and then again pointed feet. One of the best ways I can help you see a difference between classical Pilates and neoclassical Pilates that Michael Miller Pilates is part of is in classical Pilates, it's done that way because that's the way Joe does it. It's pretty convincing. There's so much to talk about here. In the coming up, if there's a press through the heels and that some of that press is lost and then regained, what does that say about the movement? In a way, you have to even begin to say that, look, there's a grip at the ankles. There's a grip at the ankles. And that grip fluctuates in strength based on the load that's coming up. Okay? And so there's something about strength or flexibility or timing or engagement that is in the way of not maintaining control without having your feet waver as you're pushing out the heels during the roll-up. Right? Why is there a loss of strength at that end point? Is how I'd say it, because it's an axis of rotation that you're seeking to maintain control of, and as you come up, the loading of your body challenges that grip. Okay? I've got like 3 different points I want to make, and I'm mushing them all together. Throughout much of Pilates, there's an open embrace of pressing out through the heels and dorsiflexion as one direction of doing things. But then the other way of doing things is with locked knees and pointed toes. And so in this video that I'm watching, where this is happening on the way up, the pointed feet, the perfectly curled over dancer foot, no insult intended, just a straight foot, curled toes. On the roll down, to me, shows fierce quadricep engagement. Meaning the quads are really engaged. You can just look and see it. The musculature really pops out. And why is that? Why is that? Well, that's because that's the capacity within the student to spread the load uniformly within the constricts of doing something classically without knowing the underlying physics that's going on. I know that I'm going on forever on this, but it's such a big subject. So the roll-up is endpoints. I struck that theme, right, of the roll-up, the roll-over, side kicks. There's dorsiflexion at the ankle. But then in an opposite direction, there's either nothing in terms of foot or pointed foot, which generally means locked knee and over-engagement of the quads. And why does that matter? Because what's the target? Control. Why? Because that's what Joe calls his science, his study, his controlology. Right? And to get control, contrology develops the body uniformly. And to the extent that you take those words seriously, in order to engage the body more uniformly or develop the body more uniformly, you have to establish endpoints at the metatarsals as well as everywhere else. But you have to let go of locked knees and pointed toes in order to spread the load more evenly. And so if you're well enough to do the teaser and you like the way you're doing teaser, then it's not hard to just stay engaged in the metatarsals without locking your knees and play with that enough to at least gain a sensation of a difference, a distinction. And you may want to stay within the custom and the tradition of the classical expression, or your own sensation and recognition of the difference take you to what you find preferable, which is you can have pointed toes, but you need an endpoint of tension at the metatarsal so that the quads can not be so overengaged. So all of this is talking way too far from right here, the core, the center, because it all comes from there, and that's, isn't that number 3? The order that you do things in that matters. That's my number 3. It's the order that you do things in that matters. And Pilates being eccentric and coming out from the core is not metaphorical. It is that this grip finds itself and then reaches out and connects through other endpoints to the furthest one in both directions, ears and metatarsals, in order to do what? In order to most uniformly engage itself. So when I say in my title, number 4, no, hold on. Coming from the core, right? So cueing can be everything. And the first thing that I don't know about from watching the video is what the cueing is. And secondly, if there's any adduction at the inner thighs, right, in order to cause the exhale, and that the adduction at the inner thighs, the engagement at the inner thighs, let's try to make that look this, the engagement at the inner thighs is that involutes the grip. It's having the core that actually has an involution that allows you to play off of that grip out to your ankles and the end point at the ankles. And a key part of that is adduction between the legs, where you squeeze your inner thighs together. So because this person who's setting up an example has a waiver in their effort that comes from the loading, which could be the timing, not just strength or flexibility, and it could be what level of uniform engagement is going on to make the movement happen. So to do that, to do a roll-up, there's so much ground you've covered already, probably. But the whole thing of timing the in place with the out through the heels so that you can squeeze your legs together to cause your exhale and have your exhale go out through the press out your heels. Have your exhale go out your heels, which takes you very deeply into the grip of your hips, right? The Pilates culture is eyes wide shut. When you understand about endpoints and the difference that they make in distributing the load of your body and making alignment perceptible, when you do that, then what? Then it's easier to make a discernment between what's about Pilates, regardless of what dance is. I have no idea what dance is. I mean, really. I mean, but in a way, to me, it has something to do with art. It is art, where Pilates is a reaction. How about that? Pilates is a pure reaction to the reality a human being finds itself in, who wishes to survive. Right? The poem of the mat work, the sequence of the mat, is a pure reflection of the physics that we find ourselves in. And a big part of that physics is what? Gravity. All right? So it starts at the core and having a grip, and having part of that grip is squeezing your inner thighs together, an open airway, and a willingness to crease at sternum, which all might have to be spring supported to be gotten to as quickly as possible. But all of those things, crease at sternum, is for another day. But to squeeze your legs together to cause your exhale and push out through your heels, exhale out through your heels, metaphorically speaking. I know it doesn't happen literally. Gives you an engagement at the end point, and off of that engagement, you get even deeper engagement in your core, because the two play off of one another. It has to do with core retention. So play with this on your own and know the difference. And it's sort of weird to me that Pilates is all supposed to be from here, from the center out, which it is, completely. How can you not build your dynamic tension if there is no central grip to play off of? So the thing about it, it's not dance, it's Pilates. the distinguish from within the MMP point of view, okay? But MMP point of view takes into mind physics and the biology and Joe's book, or Joe's book, and tries to theorize an ideal within Joe's book within the purview of science. And there's a whole lot of Pilates that exists out there that has no interest in even considering science in its engagement of the subject. Okay. And so my point about letting go of pointed feet, if you're willing to recognize, I mean, you see Joe doing dorsiflexion. If you can point your feet and yet still have an end point of tension at the metatarsals, you use that to distribute the load. It's a necessary thing. It's a physics thing. And you can either understand that and employ that, or ignore that and carry the load Yeah, it's weird. Excuse me for looking at my notes, but it was such a chaotic day. Oh, there I am at Feel the Target. Okay. Oh. Yeah, I pretty much talked about all this stuff. And that's where I ended up saying, know your target. See, feel the difference. And once you, I'm saying evaluate different ways and feel the difference. I don't have to convince you of anything that your own sensation isn't ready to convince you of if you're willing to acknowledge your own sensation. And so when you do that, you not only know the difference, you not only know why, but you have sensation of being more uniformly engaged in your body, knowing where your head belongs, from corner tension between your ears and your shoulders. Feel the difference. And then right behind that I say, know your target. And so at whatever level of Pilates you're teaching, and from whatever discipline or background, and it's a very good guiding star of what you're aiming for is uniform effort, uniform development, developing uniformly. And what does that mean to you? Developing uniformly. Anthropology develops the body uniformly. I don't know how I'm going to synthesize this over on Facebook. Feel the difference. Know your target. An exhortation of mine to my friends and associates for a long time has been remember to breathe. Remember to breathe. Because for me that's saying in your mind, remember it. To remember it's a thinking thing. And breathing is an organic now thing. It's moving. It's in flow thing. It's a flow thing. And when you take your thinking thing and connect it to what's in flow, you're much more connected to the world you're in. And what the point of the pursuing of Pilates is all about is developing the body's capacity, the mind's capacity, and the observer's capacity to all participate. See, I don't like it as personified expressions. I like the human being is the personification, and the capacities are being, thinking, and observing. Because it becomes a distraction or off the mark to start focusing on or think of the observer instead of observing as the instructor trying to help a student attain their own autonomy in what you're there to instruct them towards. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Add two and two. Go be a presenter. Make money just explaining CT and MMP because that's all I got to give you. And if that's not enough, then perhaps somebody else during a different time or a different hour, a different place. Direct your own thinking. Direct your thinking. Geist.